Welcome, hello, and welcome to Druttercup's book club. I hope that you can hear me. I haven't tested my system since I got home, but I also haven't messed around with it, so there's a limit to what can go wrong, she says optimistically. And yes, if you're someone who celebrated Christmas, I hope you had a good one, and I hope that Limbo Week is treating you kindly. Remember, this is the week that doesn't count. The week in which chocolate and cheese have no calories. Just saying. But also when nobody knows when the bins go out. Indeed, chocolate for breakfast week, yes. This is the week when you can legitimately get away with having selection boxes for Christmas, for breakfast, and nobody can criticise you because everybody else is probably doing similar. Also, usually the point when people start going, why did I buy this much food? There are only 3 of us. What was I expecting? Some kind of siege? Hello, Grono. Okay. So, pardon me. Excuse me. Oh no. Oh, bad chocolate. I hope you're feeling better, Hiram. I made chocolate fudge yesterday. Safe chocolate fudge. From 2 ingredients. It was quite impressive. Right. So, welcome to Druttercup's book club. We are on Hound of the Baskervilles, and we are on Chapter 10, Extract from the Diary of Dr. Watson. It is, yes, Hiram, Coke is excellent against nausea. It is one of the recommended treatments if you get a stomach bug. Flat Coke, mainly. So, I'm going to be experimenting with a slightly more controlled voice. Whether that will work or not, I don't know. But I've been practicing my reading. Oh dear. I've been practicing my audiobook reading. You had yogurt and fruit for breakfast, but it was oat-based yogurt and tasted so rubbish you had to eat some chocolate to make up for it. Yes. I discovered this week that apparently oat milk whips up to an absolutely solid foam, which is going to be an interesting thing to play with. Well, now I'm home and have access to my milk frother, because I've always assumed that the really hard setting wouldn't really do a lot. But you can frankly sculpt with it. It's great. Okay. If you're sitting comfortably, then I'll begin. Chapter 10, Extract from the Diary of Dr. Watson. So far, I have been able to quote from the reports which I have forwarded during these early days to Sherlock Holmes. Now, however, I have arrived at a point in my narrative where I am compelled to abandon this method, and to trust once more to my recollections, aided by the diary which I kept at the time. A few extracts from the latter will carry me on to those scenes which are indelibly fixed in every detail upon my memory. I proceed, therefore, then, from the morning which followed our abortive chase of the convict, and our other strange experiences upon the moor. Welcome, Kate B. Twitch is just being Twitch. Apparently notifications are something that happen to other people. Once again, I am seriously considering swapping to YouTube. October 16th. A dull and foggy day with a drizzle of rain. Oh, it's today. The house is banked in with rolling clouds, which rise now and then to show the dreary curves of the moor, with thin silver veins upon the sides of the hills, and the distant boulders gleaming where the light strikes upon their wet faces. It is melancholy outside and in. The baronet is in a black reaction after the excitements of the night. I'm conscious myself of a weight at my heart and a feeling of impending danger, ever-present danger, which is the more terrible because I am unable to define it. And have I not cause for such a feeling? Consider the long sequence of incidents which have all pointed to some sinister influence which is at work around us. There is the death of the last occupant of the hall, fulfilling so exactly the conditions of the family legend, and there were the repeated reports from peasants of the appearance of a strange creature upon the moor. Twice I have with my own ears heard the sound which resembled the distant baying of a hound. It is incredible, impossible, that it should really be outside the ordinary laws of nature. A spectral hound which leaves material footmarks and fills the air with its howling is surely not to be thought of. Stapleton may fall in with such a superstition, and Mortimer also. But if I have one quality upon earth, it is common sense, and nothing will persuade me to believe in such a thing. To do so would be to descend to the level of those poor peasants, who are not content with a mere fiend dog, but must needs describe him with hellfire shooting from his mouth and eyes. Holmes would not listen to such fancies, and I am his agent. But facts are facts, and I have twice heard this crying upon the moor. Suppose that there were really some huge hound loose upon it. That would go far to explain everything. But where could such a hound lie concealed? Where did it get its food? Where did it come from? How was it that no one saw it by day? It must be confessed that the natural explanation offers almost as many difficulties as the other. And always, apart from the hound, there is the fact of the human agency in London. The man in the cab, and the letter which warned Sir Henry against the moor. This at least was real, but it might have been the work of a protecting friend as easily as an enemy. Where is that friend or enemy now? Has he remained in London, or has he followed us down here? Could he be the stranger whom I saw upon the tor? It is true that I have had only the one glance at him, and yet there are some things to which I am ready to swear. He is no one whom I have seen down here, and I have now met all the neighbours. The figure was far taller than that of Stapleton, far thinner than that of Frankland. Barrymore it might possibly have been, but we had left him behind us, and I am certain that he could not have followed us. A stranger, then, is still dogging us just as a stranger dogged us in London. We have never shaken him off. If I could lay my hands upon that man, then at last we might find ourselves at the end of all our difficulties. To this one purpose I must now devote all my energies. My first impulse was to tell Sir Henry all my plans. My second, and wisest one, is to play my own game and speak as little as possible to anyone. He is silent and distrait. His nerves have been strangely shaken by that sound upon the moor. I will say nothing to add to his anxieties, but I will take my own steps to attain my own end. We had a small scene this morning after breakfast. Barrymore asked leave to speak with Sir Henry, and they were closeted in his study some little time. Sitting in the billiard-room, I more than once heard the sound of voices raised, and I had a pretty good idea what the point was which was under discussion. After a time, the baronet opened his door and called for me. Barrymore considers that he has a grievance, he said. He thinks it was unfair on our part to hunt his brother-in-law down when he, of his own free will, had told us the secret. The butler was standing very pale, but very collected before us. I may have spoken too warmly, sir, said he, and if I have, I am sure that I beg your pardon. At the same time, I was very much surprised when I heard you two gentlemen come back this morning, and learned that you have been chasing Selden. The poor fellow is enough to fight against without my putting more upon his track." "If you had told us of your own free will, it would have been a different thing," said the baronet. "You only told us, or rather your wife only told us, when it was forced from you, and you could not help yourself." "I didn't think you would have taken advantage of it, Sir Henry. Indeed I didn't." "The man is a public danger. There are lonely houses scattered over the moor, and he is a fellow who would stick at nothing. You only want to get a glimpse of his face to see that. Look at Mr. Stapleton's house, for example, with no one but himself to defend it. There's no safety for anyone until he's under lock and key." "He'll break into no house, sir. I give you my solemn word upon that. But he will never trouble anyone in this country again. I assure you, Sir Henry, that in a very few days the necessary arrangements will have been made, and he will be on his way to South America. For God's sake, sir, I beg of you not to let the police know that he's still on the moor. They've given up the chase there, and he can lie quiet until the ship is ready for him. You can't tell on him without getting my wife and me into trouble. I beg you, sir, to say nothing to the police." "What do you say, Watson?" I shrugged my shoulders. If he was safely out of the country, it would relieve the taxpayer of a burden. "But how about the chance of his holding someone up before he goes?" "He would not do anything so mad, sir. We've provided him with all that he can want. To commit a crime would be to show where he was hiding." "That is true," said Sir Henry. "Well, Barrymore, God bless you, sir, and thank you from my heart. It would have killed my poor wife if he been taken again." "I guess we're aiding and abetting a felony, Watson. But after what we've heard, I don't feel as if I could give the man up, so there is an end of it. All right, Barrymore, you can go." With a few broken words of gratitude, the man turned, but he hesitated and then came back. "You've been so kind to us, sir, that I should like to do the best I can for you in return. I know something, Sir Henry, and perhaps I should have said it before, but it was long after the inquest that I found it out. I've never breathed a word about it yet to mortal man. It's about poor Sir Charles's death." The baronet and I were both upon our feet. "Do you know how he died?" "No, sir, I don't know that." "What then?" "I know why he was at the gate at that hour. It was to meet a woman." "To meet a woman? He?" "Yes, sir." "And the woman's name?" "I can't give you the name, sir, but I can give you the initials. Her initials were L.L." "How do you know this, Barrymore?" "Oh, sorry, wrong accent. How do you know this, Barrymore?" "Well, Sir Henry, your uncle had a letter that morning. He usually had a great many letters, for he was a public man and well known for his kind heart, so that everyone who was in trouble was glad to turn to him. But that morning, as it chanced, there was only this one letter, so I took the more notice of it. It was from Coombe Tracy, and it was addressed in a woman's hand." "Well?" "Well, sir, I thought no more of the matter, and never would have done had it not been for my wife. Only a few weeks ago she was cleaning out Sir Charles's study. It had never been touched since his death, and she found the ashes of a burned paper at the back of the grate. The greater part of it was charred to pieces, but one little slip, the end of a page, hung together, and the writing could still be read, though it was grey on a black ground. It seemed to us to be a postscript at the end of the letter, and it said, 'Please, as you are a gentleman, burn this letter and be at the gate by 10 o'clock. Beneath it was signed the initials L.L. "Have you got that slip?" "No, sir, it crumbled all to bits after we moved it." "Had Sir Charles received any other letters in the same writing?" "Well, sir, I took no particular notice of his letters. I should not have noticed this one, only it happened to come along." "And you have no idea who L.L. is?" "No, sir, no more than you have. But I expect if we could lay our hands upon that lady, we should know more about Sir Charles's death." "I cannot understand, Barrymore, how you came to conceal this important information." "Well, sir, it was immediately after that our own trouble came to us. And then again, sir, we were both of us very fond of Sir Charles, as well we might be, considering all that he has done for us. To rake this up couldn't help our poor master, and it was well to go carefully when there's a lady in the case, even the best of us." "You thought it might injure his reputation?" "Well, sir, I thought no good could come of it. But now you've been kind to us, and I feel as if it would be treating you unfairly not to tell you all I know about the matter." "Very good, Barrymore, you can go." When the butler had left us, Sir Henry turned to me. "Well, Watson, what do you think of this new light?" "It seems to leave the darkness rather blacker than before." Leave it there a sec. Used to live in a town with a prison, Kate B, and everyone said it was the safest place to go since anyone escaping was leaving town, not sticking around. Actually, I can see that. I used to live in the old prison, one of the old prison warder cottages at Canterbury Prison. So literally, our back wall, we had a very, very high back wall on the back garden, and quite literally the other side was the prison exercise yard. That was a bit weird. But that was basically just on the outskirts of the city. You can imagine criminals on the loose don't want to come too close to the authorities anyway. Yeah, it's making a way to where they have contacts and friends rather than sticking around for the most part. There's also prison up near Fangfoss in York, which has one of the main roads running by it. Now that one has the big sign up saying "Do not stop for hitchhikers," because you never know. How's it sounding today, by the way? Hope everything, volume and what we laughingly call performance, is okay. The last over-the-wall prison break was in the 1960s. More recent escapes were work release folks who didn't come back. Yeah, that's the thing. It's the most common way for people to abscond. Thank you very much, Kate B. I take that as a compliment. Especially since, not this week, but next week, I'm putting my hat into the ring and starting some auditions on ACX, in the hope that somebody wants a vaguely middle-class sounding British woman to narrate their audiobook for them. Okay, meanwhile, back at the conversation. Seems to leave the darkness rather blacker than before. So I think, but if we can only trace LL, it should clear up the whole business. We've gained that much. We know that there is someone who has the facts if we can only find her. What do you think we should do? Let Holmes know all about it at once. It will give him the clue for which he has been seeking. I'm very much mistaken if it does not bring him down. I went at once to my room and drew up my report of the morning's conversation for Holmes. Thank you very much. I mean, I have no idea if I'm going to get anywhere. But we shall see. It would be lovely to get into that. That's something I've wanted to do for a long while. So finally biting the bullet this year. I went at once to my room and drew up my report of the morning's conversation for Holmes. It was evident to me that he had been very busy of late, for the notes which I had from Baker Street were few and short, with no comments upon the information which I had supplied, and hardly any reference to my mission. No doubt his blackmailing case is absorbing all his faculties, and yet this new factor must surely arrest his attention and renew his interest. I wish that he were here. October 17th. All day today the rain poured down, rustling on the ivy and dripping from the eaves. I thought of the convict out upon the bleak, cold, shelterless moor. Poor devil. Whatever his crimes, he's suffered something to atone for them. And then I thought of that other one, the face in the cab, the figure against the moon. Was he also out in that deluge, the unseen watcher, the man of darkness? In the evening I put on my waterproof, and I walked far upon the sodden moor, full of dark imaginings, the rain beating upon my face and the wind whistling about my ears. God help those who wander into the great mire now, for even the firm uplands are becoming a morass. I found the black tor upon which I had seen the solitary watcher, and from its craggy summit I looked out myself across the melancholy downs. Rain squalls drifted across their russet face, and the heavy slate-coloured clouds hung low up over the landscape, trailing in grey wreaths down the sides of the fantastic hills. In the distant hollow on the left, half hidden by the mist, the two thin towers of Baskerville Hall rose above the trees. They were the only signs of human life which I could see, save only those prehistoric huts which lay thickly upon the slopes of the hills. Nowhere was there any trace of that lonely man whom I had seen on the same spot 2 nights before. As I walked back, I was overtaken by Dr. Mortimer driving in his dog-cart over a rough moorland track which led from the outlying farmhouse of Foulmire. Wow, now there is a name to conjure with. Where do you live? Foulmire. The name of your farm, Foulmire. I mean, I feel it's probably lacking curb appeal. Maybe that's just me. He has been very attentive to us, and hardly a day has passed that he has not called at the hall to see how we were getting on. He insisted upon my climbing into his dog-cart, and he gave me a lift homeward. I found him much troubled over the disappearance of his little spaniel. It had wandered onto the moor and never come back. I gave him such consolation as I might, but I thought of the pony on the Grimpen Mire, and I do not fancy that he will see his little dog again. As an American, it just sounds like a UK place name. I mean, it means horrible bog or horrible swamp or awful swamp. It's not one of the worst UK place names, of course. There is that street, of course, which is... Oh, yeah, that's easy. We've got Penistone as well. And we also have, and she says, because this is a genuine place, if I recall correctly, Cunt Lane, which was indeed where the ladies of negotiable affection used to work back in the day. Truth in advertising. There's one that you would definitely be cautious reading out to anyone over the phone, wouldn't you? As I said earlier, though, there's a prison near the town of Spittal, which is adjacent to Fangfoss. By the way, Mortimer, said I, as we jolted along the rough road, I suppose there are few people living within driving distance of this whom you do not know. Hardly any, I think. Can you then tell me of the name of any woman whose initials are LL? He thought for a few minutes. No, said he. There are a few gypsies and labouring folk for whom I can't answer, but among the farmers or gentry there's no one whose initials are those. Wait a bit, though, he added after a pause. There is Laura Lyons. Her initials are LL, but she lives in Coombe Tracy. Who is she? I asked. She is Franklin's daughter. What, old Franklin the Crank? Exactly. She married an artist named Lyons, who came sketching on the moor. He proved to be a blackguard and deserted her. The fault, from what I hear, may not have been entirely on one side. Her father refused to have anything to do with her because she had married without his consent, and perhaps for one or two other reasons as well. So between the old sinner and the young one, the girl has had a pretty bad time. How does she live? I fancy old Franklin allows her a pittance, but it cannot be more, for his own affairs are considerably involved. Whatever she may have deserved, one cannot allow her to go hopelessly to the bad. Her story did get about, and several of the people here did something to enable her to earn an honest living. Stapleton did for one, and Sir Charles for another. I gave a trifle myself. It was to set her up in the typewriting business. He wanted to know the object of my inquiries, but I managed to satisfy his curiosity without telling him too much, for there is no reason we should take anyone into our confidence. Tomorrow morning I shall find my way to Coombe Tracy, and if I can see that this Mrs. Laura Lyons, of equivocal reputation, a long step will have been made towards clearing one incident in this chain of mysteries. I am certainly developing the wisdom of the serpent, for when Mortimer pressed his questions to an inconvenient extent, I asked him casually to what type Franklin's skull belonged, and so heard nothing but craniology for the rest of our drive. I have not lived for years with Sherlock Holmes for nothing. I have only one other incident to record upon this tempestuous and melancholy day. This was my conversation with Barrymore just now, which gives me one more strong clue which I can play in due time. Mortimer had stayed to dinner, and he and the baronet played a carte afterwards. The butler brought me my coffee into the library, and I took the chance to ask him a few questions. "Well," said I, "has this precious relation of yours departed, or is he still lurking out yonder?" "I don't know, sir. I hope to heaven he has gone, for he's brought nothing but trouble here. I've not heard of him since I left out food for him last, and that was 3 days ago." "Did you see him then?" "No, sir, but the food was gone when next I went that way." "Then he was certainly there." "So you would think, sir, unless it was the other man who took it." I sat with my coffee cup halfway to my lips and stared at Barrymore. "You know that there is another man, then?" "Yes, sir. There's another man upon the moor." "Have you seen him?" "No, sir." "How do you know of him, then?" "Selden told me of him, sir, a week ago or more. He's in hiding too, but he's not a convict as far as I can make out. I don't like it, Dr. Watson. I tell you straight, sir, that I don't like it." He spoke with a sudden passion of earnestness. "Now listen to me, Barrymore. I have no interest in this matter but that of your master. I've come here with no object except to help him. Tell me frankly what it is that you don't like." Yeah, Barrymore, any chance you could have, come up with that a bit sooner? Barrymore hesitated for a moment, as if he regretted his outburst or found it difficult to express his own feelings in words. "It's all these goings-on, sir," he cried at last, waving his hand towards the rain-lashed window which faced the moor. "There's foul play somewhere, and there's black villainy brewing, to that I'll swear. Very glad I should be, sir, to see Sir Henry on his way back to London again." "But what is it that alarms you?" "Look at Sir Charles's death. That was bad enough for all the coroner said. Look at the noises on the moor at night. There's not a man would cross it after sundown if he was paid for it. Look at this stranger hiding out yonder and watching and waiting. What's he waiting for? What does it mean? It means no good to anyone of the name of Baskerville, and very glad I shall be to quit of it all on the day that Sir Henry's new servants are ready to take over the hall." "But about this stranger," said I. "Can you tell me anything about him? What did Selden say? Did he find out where he hid, or what he was doing?" "He saw him once or twice, but he's a deep one and gives nothing away. At first he thought it was the police, but soon he found out that he had some lay of his own. A kind of gentleman he was, as far as he could see, but what he was doing he could not make out." "And where did he say that he lived?" "Among the old houses on the hillside, the stone huts where the old folk used to live." "But how about his food?" "Selden found out he has got a lad who works for him and brings all he needs. I dare say he goes to Coombe Tracy for what he wants." "Very good, Barrymore. We may talk further of this some other time." When the butler had gone, I walked over to the black window and looked through a blurred pane at the driving clouds and at the tossing outline of the windswept trees. It's a wild night indoors, and what must it be in a stone hut upon the moor? What passion of hatred can it be which leads a man to lurk in such a place at such a time? And what deep and earnest purpose can he have which calls for such a trial? There in that hut upon the moor seems to lie the very centre of that problem which has vexed me so sorely. I swear that another day shall not have passed before I have done all that man can do to reach the heart of the mystery. So, somebody's lurking on the moor. We knew somebody was lurking on the moor, but yeah. Barrymore's definitely filtering out the news bit by bit, isn't he? We don't know anything about the death. Oh, by the way, here's information about a letter. Oh, and by the way, we know there's somebody on the moor. Oh, and by the way, we know that there's a convict on the moor because he's my brother-in-law. Somebody needs to sit him down and just have a chat. Is there anything else you can tell us? Right. You can't keep... No, I can't really fault him for keeping his wife's secrets, except that it's a multiple murderer. So, Barrymore knows he's being published serially. Yes. You reckon he's extending his part by dribbling out the information bit by bit? I can see that, actually. That would work. An anonymous tip to the police might have been nice. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Even if you weren't going for the reward or anything. So, I will carry on to chapter 11. In the meantime, I take it the stream is as stable as OBS claims it is. Because it seems to be okay, but the last one I did was a bit wonky. Right. Swift drink. And we will launch into chapter 11. Fine for you. Okay, cool. Cool. Chapter 11. The Man on the Tour. The extract from my private diary, which forms the last chapter, has brought my narrative up to the 18th of October, a time when these strange events began to move swiftly towards their terrible conclusion. The incidents of the next few days are indelibly graven upon my recollection, and I can tell them without reference to the notes made at the time. I start them from the day which had succeeded that upon which I had established two facts of great importance. The one, that Mrs. Laura Lyons of Coombe Tracey had written to Sir Charles Baskerville, and made an appointment with him at the very place and hour that he met his death. The other, that the lurking man upon the moor was to be found among the stone huts upon the hillside. With these two facts in my possession, I felt that either my intelligence or my courage must be deficient if I could not throw some further light upon these dark places. Oh, hi, Rim. Yes. I hope you feel better, because, oh dear, you do sound rough. I had no opportunity to tell the baronet what I had learned about Mrs. Lyons upon the evening before, for Dr. Mortimer remained with him at cards until it was very late. At breakfast, however, I informed him about my discovery, and asked him whether he would care to accompany me to Coombe Tracey. At first he was very eager to come, but on second thoughts it seemed to both of us that if I went along the results might be better. The more formal we made the visit, the less information we might obtain. I left Sir Henry behind, therefore, not without some prickings of conscience, and drove off upon my new quest. When I reached Coombe Tracey, I told Perkins to put up the horses, and I made inquiries for the lady whom I had come to interrogate. I had no difficulty in finding her rooms, which were central and well appointed. A maid showed me in without ceremony, and as I entered the sitting-room, a lady, who was sitting before a Remington typewriter, sprang up with a pleasant smile of welcome. Her face fell, however, when she saw that I was a stranger, and she sat down again and asked me the object of my visit. The first impression left by Mrs. Lyons was one of extreme beauty. Her eyes and hair were of the same rich hazel colour, and her cheeks, though considerably freckled, were flushed with the exquisite bloom of the brunette, the dainty pink which lurks at the heart of the sulphur rose. Admiration was, I repeat, the first impression. But the second was criticism. There was something subtly wrong with the face, some coarseness of expression, some hardness perhaps of eye, some looseness of lip which marred its perfect beauty. But these, of course, are afterthoughts. At the moment I was simply conscious that I was in the presence of a very handsome woman, and that she was asking me the reasons for my visit. I had not quite understood until that instant how delicate my mission was. "I have the pleasure," said I, of knowing your father." It was a clumsy introduction, and the lady made me feel it. There is nothing in common between my father and me, she said. I owe him nothing, and his friends are not mine. If it were not for the late Sir Charles Baskerville and some other kind hearts, I might have starved for all my father cared. It was about the late Sir Charles Baskerville that I have come here to see you. The freckles started out on the lady's face. What can I tell you about him? She asked, and her fingers played nervously over the stops of her typewriter. You knew him, did you not? I have already said that I owe a great deal to his kindness. If I am able to support myself, it is largely due to the interest which he took in my unhappy situation. Where did the freckles end up? Ladies' man and judge of his fellow men. Yeah, you realise that at the time, this is the after fact. There's the whole, maybe she is a bit hard-faced. Because clearly this woman has been through it. But at the time, of course, Watson's in the presence of a beautiful woman and just, okay, is just going with it. But yes, imagine getting to that point and then realising, oh, I have absolutely no way to open this conversation in any kind of delicacy. Oops. Did you correspond with him? The lady looked quickly up with an angry gleam in her hazel eyes. What is the object of these questions? She asked sharply. The object is to avoid a public scandal. It is better that I should ask them here than that the matter should pass outside our control. She was silent, and her face was still very pale. At last she looked up with something reckless and defiant in her manner. Well, I'll answer, she said. What are your questions? Did you correspond with Sir Charles? I certainly wrote to him once or twice to acknowledge his delicacy and his generosity. Have you the dates of those letters? No. Have you ever met him? Yes, once or twice, when he came to Coombe Tracey. He was a very retiring man, and he preferred to do good by stealth. But if you saw him so seldom and wrote so seldom, how did he know enough about your affairs to be able to help you, as you say that he has done? She met my difficulty with the utmost readiness. There were several gentlemen who knew my sad history and united to help me. One was Mr. Stapleton, a neighbour and an intimate friend of Sir Charles. He was exceedingly kind, and it was through him that Sir Charles learned about my affairs. I knew already that Sir Charles Baskerville had made Stapleton his almoner upon many. Start that paragraph again. Excuse me, my tongue has decided to run away with me. Give me a mo. Ahem. I knew already that Sir Charles Baskerville had made Stapleton his almoner upon several occasions, so the lady's statement bore the impress of truth upon it. Did you ever write to Sir Charles asking him to meet you? I continued. Almoner. It's a medieval term. One who delivers alms, as in alms to the poor. Pre-welfare state, an almoner would be usually an officer of the church, but might also work for the ruling landowner. And it's a specific. It is a specific term. It's one where either the church or the local nobility, local feudal lord, would deliver effectively stipends or financial help, food, to usually widows and orphans is the standard. Those who couldn't earn a living but who still lived on the land where someone had responsibility for them. It is a feudal term. So it's in the context of having responsibility for the people you technically, I'm not going to say own, have sway over, have official responsibility and influence over. You discovered that word in a webtoon of all places. Proxy is another option. I think in the more recent edition, I think I have seen it done as proxy. Did you ever write to Sir Charles asking him to meet you? I continued. Mrs. Lyons flushed with anger again. Really, sir, this is a very extraordinary question. I'm sorry, madam, but I must repeat it. Then I answer, certainly not. Not on the very day of Sir Charles's death. The flush had faded in an instant, and her deathly face was before me. Her dry lips could not speak the no, which I saw rather than heard. Surely your memory deceives you, said I. I could even quote a passage of your letter. It ran, Please, please, as you are a gentleman, burn this letter and be at the gate by 10 o'clock. I thought that she had fainted, but she recovered herself by a supreme effort. Is there no such thing as a gentleman? She gasped. You do Sir Charles an injustice. He did burn the letter, but sometimes a letter may be legible even when burned. You acknowledge now that you wrote it. Yes, I did write it, she cried, pouring out her soul in a torrent of words. I did write it. Why should I deny it? I have no reason to be ashamed of it. I wished him to help me. I believed that if I had an interview I could gain his help, so I asked him to meet me. But why at such an hour? Because I had only just learned that he was going to London the next day, and might be away for months. There were reasons why I could not get there earlier. But why a rendezvous in the garden instead of a visit to the house? Do you think a woman could go alone at that hour to a bachelor's house? Well, what happened when you did get there? I never went. Mrs. Lyons. No, I swear to you on all that I hold sacred. I never went. Something intervened to prevent my going. What was that? That is a private matter. I cannot tell it. You acknowledge, then, that you made an appointment with Sir Charles at the very hour and place at which he met his death, but you deny that you kept the appointment. That is the truth. Again and again I cross-questioned her, but I could never get past that point. You wouldn't go out past 8 p.m. now, wouldn't do it near a moor and back then. No. Do you know how dark it is on a moor with no street lighting? I made the mistake once of going for a walk when I went to college. I went for a walk in the local stand of woods. And it was only, I think, 7 o'clock in the evening. And I was maybe 50 metres from the nearest road. It wasn't far. But when the light went, my God, I was in deep trouble. I literally could not see hand in front of face. So yeah, I can totally understand not wanting to go out on the moor. You're not going out after 4 p.m. if you can help it. Yeah. And she couldn't sound shadier if she tried. Mrs. Lyons, said I, as I rose from this long and inconclusive interview, you're taking a very great responsibility and putting yourself in a very false position by not making an absolutely clean breast of all that you know. If I have to call in the aid of the police, you will find how seriously you are compromised. If your position's innocent, why did you in the first instance deny having written to Sir Charles upon that date? Because I feared that some false conclusion might be drawn from it, and that I might find myself involved in a scandal. And why were you so pressing that Sir Charles should destroy your letter? If you've read the letter, you will know. I did not say that I'd read all the letter. You quoted some of it. I quoted the postscript. The letter had, as I said, been burned, and it was not all legible. I ask you once again why it was that you were so pressing that Sir Charles should destroy this letter which he received on the day of his death. The matter is a very private one. The more reason why you should avoid a public investigation. I will tell you then. If you've heard anything of my unhappy history, you will know that I made a rash marriage and had reason to regret it. I have heard so much. My life has been one incessant persecution from a husband whom I abhor. The law is upon his side, and every day I am faced by the possibility that he may force me to live with him. At the time that I wrote this letter to Sir Charles, I had learned that there was a prospect of my regaining my freedom if certain expenses could be met. It meant everything to me. Peace of mind, happiness, self-respect, everything. I knew Sir Charles's generosity, and I thought that if he heard the story from my own lips, he would help me. So there she's, in case it's not bleeding obvious, she is talking about the possibility of getting a respectable divorce rather than being forced back into cohabiting with someone who sounds like he's abusive, at least a philanderer, at best. At worst, an abusive husband. So there she was, hoping that Sir Charles would help finance her divorce. Probably her legal fees. Then how is it that you did not go? Because I received help in the interval from another source. Why then did you not write to Sir Charles and explain this? So I should have done had I not seen his death in the paper next morning. The woman's story hung coherently together, and all my questions were unable to shake it. I could only check it by finding if she had indeed instituted divorce proceedings against her husband at or about the time of the tragedy. It was unlikely that she would dare to say that she had not been to Baskerville Hall if she really had been, for a trap would be necessary to take her there, and could not have returned to Coombe Tracey until the early hours of the morning. Such an excursion could not be kept secret. The probability was, therefore, that she was telling the truth, or at least a part of the truth. I came away baffled and disheartened. Once again I had reached that dead wall which seemed to be built across every path by which I tried to get to the object of my mission. And yet the more I thought of the lady's face and of her manner, the more I felt that something was being held back from me. Why should she turn so pale? Why should she fight against every admission until it was forced from her? Why should she have been so reticent at the time of the tragedy? Surely the explanation of all this could not be as innocent as she would have me believe. For the moment I could proceed no further in that direction, but must turn back to that other clue which was to be sought for among the stone huts upon the moor. And that was a most vague direction. I realized it as I drove back and noted how hill after hill showed traces of the ancient people. Barrymore's only indication had been that the stranger lived in one of these abandoned huts, and many hundreds of them are scattered throughout the length and breadth of the moor. Watson, not everyone wants to explain their whole lives to a stranger. Yeah. She just basically has no real sense of the urgency, does she? Because he's operating under the knowledge that Sir Henry is in danger, or likely to be in danger. Unfortunately, other people have their own dramas and their own problems going on. And she, for one, just doesn't see why she should be open about something that is embarrassing and or scandalous. He has indeed been living with a detective too long. I'd imagine he's very good at getting people to give him their medical history. You know? But I had my own experience for a guide, since it had shown me the man himself standing upon the summit of the Black Tor. That, then, should be the centre of my search. She doesn't know Sir Henry. No, she knew Sir Charles, if only by implication. And he was good to her. But this new young lord wouldn't know from a hole in the ground. He's not neurodiverse enough, doesn't feel the need to info dump at the first 2 hours of meeting someone to explain himself away. Yeah. While being simultaneously worried that you're boring them? Or is that just me? I'm being defeated by a screw thread. There we go. Yeah, I know exactly what you mean, Hiram. That then should be the centre of my search. From there I should explore every hut upon the moor until I lighted upon the right one. If this man were inside it, I should find out from his own lips, at the point of my revolver if necessary, who he was and why he had dogged us so long. He might slip away from us in the crowd of Regent Street, but it would puzzle him to do so upon the lonely moor. On the other hand, if I should find the hut and its tenants should not be within it, I must remain there, however long the vigil, until he returned. Holmes had missed him in London. It would indeed be a triumph for me if I could run him to earth where my master had failed. Luck had been against us again and again in this inquiry, but now at last it came to my aid, and the messenger of good fortune was none other than Mr. Frankland, who was standing, grey-whiskered and red-faced, outside the gate of his garden, which opened onto the high road upon which I had travelled. "Good day, Watson," cried he, with unwonted good humour. "You must really give your horses a rest, and come in to have a glass of wine and to congratulate me." My feelings towards him were very far from being friendly after what I had heard of his treatment of his daughter, but I was anxious to send Perkins and the wagonette home, and the opportunity was a good one. I alighted and sent a message to Sir Henry that I should walk over in time for dinner. Then I followed Frankland into his dining-room. "It's a great day for me, sir, one of the red-letter days of my life," he cried, with many chuckles. "I have brought off a double event. I mean to teach them in these parts that law is law, and there is a man here who does not fear to invoke it. I have established a right-of-way through the centre of old Middleton's Park, slap across it, sir, within 100 yards of his own front door. What do you think of that? We'll teach these magnates they can't ride roughshod over the rights of the commoners, confound them. And I've closed the wood where the Fernworthy folk used to picnic. These infernal people seem to think there are no rights of property, and that they can swarm where they like with their papers and their bottles. Both cases decided, Dr. Watson, and both in my favour. I haven't had such a day since I had Sir John Morland for trespass because he shot in his own warren." "How on earth did you do that?" "Look it up in the book, sir. It will repay your reading. Frankland versus Morland, Court of Queen's Bench. Cost me £200, but I got my verdict." "Did it do you any good?" "None, sir, none. I am proud to say I had no interest in the matter. I acted entirely from a sense of public duty. I have no doubt, for example, that the Fernworthy people will burn me in effigy tonight. I told the police last time they did it that they should stop these disgraceful exhibitions. The county constabulary is in a scandalous state, sir, and it has not afforded me the protection to which I am entitled." "Yep, it is indeed this guy who has fun filing lawsuits." "The case of Franklin versus Regina will bring the matter before the attention of the public. I told them that they would have occasion to regret their treatment of me, and already my words have come true." You think someone's going to charge him with filing frivolous lawsuits? The trouble is you can waste police time, but the only thing that could happen with lawsuits is they get kicked out. I don't know that you can... I don't think that they can really do anything to stop him. That said, at some point I could see him ending up under a bus somewhere, and literally nobody in the local area would know anything about it. "How so?" I asked. The old man put on a very knowing expression. "Because I could tell them what they're dying to know, but nothing would induce me to help the rascals in any way." I'd been casting around for some excuse by which I could get away from his gossip, but now I began to wish to hear more of it. Contempt of court, not contempt of court. That would be if he were treating the actual proceedings frivolously. Filing too many and wasting the clerk's time, again, not really a crime. Annoying, but not a crime. He would... since he's representing himself, of course, he's got more leeway. if he were relying on a public barrister, then that would be another matter. Or if he were relying on legal aid. But since he's not and he's financing his own, essentially all he's doing is just annoying everybody. And unfortunately, being annoying isn't a crime. I wish it was sometimes, but never mind. But no, he's especially since, because some of the cases have gone in his way, he is finding points of law which are valid. Now, whether they are to the public benefit, that's not the same thing. Legally, at least some of his cases are valid. He's getting verdicts one way or the other. They're not getting kicked out. Franklin's weird, and he vanishes from so many adaptations. The person who defends themselves has a fall for a client. Abso-freaking-lutely. Absolutely. If you don't already follow them on assorted social media or read their books, but you have an interest in UK law, primarily English, yeah, you can't target people with vexatious litigation. Basically, you can't do it as a method of punishing or persecuting someone. But frivolous litigation, yeah, unfortunately, there's not a lot they can do. I recommend The Secret Barrister, who is actually, as the name implies, a practicing barrister who works in both being a public lawyer. They work both to prosecute and defend, depending on what cases come up when. In the UK, in England at the moment. And they've also written some really good books on the way the law actually works. So I can heartily recommend their stuff. I think I've got one of their books. I've got the other one wishlisted. But I don't think they've yet been outed. It's a bit like Banksy. There are various people fairly sure they know who they are, but no one's really coming clean. They are interesting, though. They really are. They know their stuff so well. And they have absolutely no truck with the way the legal system got defunded while the Tories were in power. So many court days lost because courts could not be fully staffed. Junior barristers are underpaid. And some courts just not fit for use. Occasional threads exploring the offences occurring in films are also delightful. Yes! I can't remember what came up the other day. It was a fictional one, and they were asked to give their opinion on it. And that was absolutely fascinating. But yeah, if you are of a mind to, and you're not already following them on social media, I can seriously recommend their books. They're very readable and very accessible, and give you a really good idea of the state of the law in England, Wales. Scotland, of course, having its own thing. Okay, back to Frankland. Who, by the way, I am regretting the voice I just picked, because my God, that's like sandpapering my larynx. Memo, don't do that again. I had been casting around for some excuse by which I could get away from his gossip, but now I began to wish to hear more of it. I had heard it. Sorry. I had seen enough of the contrary nature of the old sinner to understand that any strong sign of interest would be the surest way to stop his confidences. Some poaching case, no doubt, said I, with an indifferent manner. Ha ha ha, my boy, a very much more important matter than that. What about the convict on the moor? I stared. You don't mean that you know where he is, said I. I may not know exactly where he is, but I'm quite sure I could help the police to lay their hands on him. Has it never struck you that the way to catch that man was to find out where he got his food and so trace it to him? He certainly seemed to be getting uncomfortably near the truth. No doubt, said I, but how do you know that he's anywhere upon the moor? I know it because I've seen with my own eyes the messenger who takes him his food. My heart sank for Barrymore. It was a serious thing to be in the power of this spiteful old busybody. But his next remark took a weight from my mind. You'll be surprised to hear that his food is taken to him by a child. I see him every day through my telescope upon the roof. He passes along the same path at the same hour, and to whom should he be going except to the convict? Here was luck indeed, and yet I suppressed all appearance of interest. A child. Barrymore had said that our unknown was supplied by a boy. It was on his track and not upon the convict's that Frankland had stumbled. If I could get his knowledge, it might save me a long and weary hunt, but incredulity and indifference were evidently my strongest cards. And thank you, Hiram, for the posture check and the hydration. Yep, he has a huge telescope on his roof, and he has bugger all to do with his day. So he spies on people. Bear in mind, the guy lives in the same village as his daughter, who he doesn't see, but just allows her enough of a stipend to live on. He is an eccentric, shall we say. I should say that it was much more likely that it was the son of one of the moorland shepherds taking out his father's dinner. The least appearance of opposition struck fire out of the old autocrat. His eyes looked malignantly at me, and his grey whiskers bristled like those of an angry cat. "Indeed, sir," said he, pointing out over the wide-stretching moor. "Do you see that black tor over yonder? Well, do you see the low hill beyond with the thorn bush upon it? It's the stoniest part of the whole moor. Is that a place where a shepherd would be likely to take his station? Your suggestion, sir, is a most absurd one." I meekly answered that I had spoken without knowing all the facts. My submission pleased him, and led him to further confidences. "You may be sure, sir, that I have very good grounds before I come to an opinion. I have seen the boy again and again with his bundle. Every day, and sometimes twice a day, I have been able... But wait a moment, Dr. Watson. Do my eyes deceive me, or is there at the present moment something moving upon that hillside?" It was several miles off, but I could distinctly see a small dark dot against the dull grey and green and grey even. "Come, sir, come," cried Frankland, rushing upstairs. "You will see with your own eyes and judge for yourself." The telescope, a formidable instrument mounted upon a tripod, stood upon the flat leads of the house. Frankland clapped his eye to it and gave a cry of satisfaction. "Quick, Dr. Watson, quick, before he passes over the hill." "Indeed, Niblick. Don't ask questions, make bond statements, and people will try and correct you. Also, leave gaps. People feel the need to rush verbally into a hole because they don't like silence." Frankland is a reply guy. Lucky for us, he was around long before Twitter was invented. Oh, Frankland would so be a sea lion. Which would probably be cheaper than taking people to court every 30 seconds, but he would definitely be of the debate me variety. There he was, sure enough, a small urchin with a little bundle upon his shoulder, toiling slowly up the hill. When he reached the crest, I saw the ragged, uncouth figure outlined for an instant against the cold blue sky. He looked round him with a furtive and stealthy air as one who dreads pursuit. Then he vanished over the hill. Well? Well, am I right? Certainly there is a boy who seems to have some secret errand. And what the errand is, even the country constable could guess, but not one word shall they have from me. And I bind you to secrecy also, Dr. Watson. Not a word, you understand? Just as you wish. They've treated me shamefully, shamefully. Debate me, yeah, as a request. It is grammatically correct. It's horrible, but it is grammatically correct. I mean, have a debate with me is better, but debate me, you can debate, therefore debate me, it kind of works. It's ugly. They've treated me shamefully, shamefully. When the facts come out in Franklin versus Regina, I venture to think that a thrill of indignation will run through the country. Nothing would induce me to help the police in any way. For all they cared, it might have been me instead of my effigy which those rascals burned at the stake. Surely you're not going? You'll help me empty the decanter in honour of this great occasion. Merely say please, yeah. Yes, no debate without consent. But I resisted all his solicitations and succeeded in dissuading him from his announced intention of walking home with me. Oh, God, can you imagine? I kept the road as long as his eye was on me, and then I struck off across the moor and made for the stony hill over which the boy had disappeared. Everything was working in my favour, and I swore that it should not be through lack of energy or perseverance that I should miss the chance which fortune had thrown in my way. The sun was already sinking when I reached the summit of the hill, and the long slopes beneath me were all golden green on one side and grey shadow on the other. A haze lay low upon the farthest skyline, out of which jutted the fantastic shapes of Belvedere and Vixen Tor. Over the wide expanse there was no sound and no movement. One great grey bird, a gull or curlew, soared aloft in the blue heaven. He and I seemed to be the only living things between the huge arch of the sky and the desert beneath it. The barren scene, the sense of loneliness, and the mystery and urgency of my task all struck a chill into my heart. The boy was nowhere to be seen. But down beneath me in a cleft of the hills there was a circle of the old stone huts, and in the middle of them there was one which retained sufficient roof to act as a screen against the weather. My heart leapt within me as I saw it. This must be the burrow where the stranger lurked. At last my foot was on the threshold of his hiding place. His secret was within my grasp. Don't go walking on the moor you don't know well at night, Watson. Yeah. Watson has just wandered out onto the moor. He has an idea where he's going, but has he really got any idea how to get back to the path? Do we think that? As I approached the hut, walking as warily as Stapleton would do when with poised net he drew near the settled butterfly, I satisfied myself that the place had indeed been used as a habitation. A vague pathway among the boulders led to the dilapidated opening which served as a door. All was silent within. The unknown might be lurking there, or he might be prowling on the moor. My nerves tingled with the sense of adventure. Throwing aside my cigarette, I closed my hand upon the butt of my revolver, and, walking swiftly up to the door, I looked in. The place was empty. It says, quicksand, Watson, you're going to have to deal with the thing my generation was convinced would be a regular threat. God, the number of kids' programs and kid-alt shows where people went under quicksand. And in the UK, quite often bogs. Bogs and swamps, they were always going to be a huge thing. Especially, as I said, kids' programs. They were very big on making swamps, when I was a kid, out of porridge. They would basically mix up a huge batch of porridge. and then whatever poor bastard had to pretend to drown in it would then get gradually submerged. It's horrible. You've had to rescue a friend's shoe from the mud before, so that one's slightly more present as a threat. Yeah, I once at Lyme Regis on a school trip discovered that they were not kidding there when they said that the mud could suck you under. The mud flats down on the beach. I was not a very old drut. I think I was about 8. I was 8 or 9. I think 8, I want to say. And at one point I ended up literally just above my knee, headed for mid-thigh, in just thick, sticky mud. So, the wellies were pointless exercise. And I managed to drop my camera there because we were all fossil hunting. Although, because the mud was so thick and soft, I actually got it back because a family found it and then went looking for whoever had dropped it. So I actually got my camera back with photos of the family who'd found it, which I thought was rather nice of them. That type of mud is still called quicksand. Yeah. Oh yeah, I mean, had I fallen over, I might have been in deep trouble because it was several feet thick. Tidal mud is it's nasty stuff. Yeah, you were forbidden from some of the shores near your grandparents. I can well believe it. It's one of the reasons that mudlarking on the Thames is actually quite dangerous, like any tidal river. The mud does not mess around. And why struggling when you're in the mud is a very, very, very bad idea.com. Shoe sunk into the mud, pulled his foot up and the shoe stayed where it was. Literally had to get your hand under the shoe and lift it out to break the suction. Yeah, I nearly lost my wellies to that. And I don't know if you've ever tried to take off Wellington boots in a hurry, but that is not something that I ever thought would happen. You love it how this makes sound like the mud is one of the old horrors. Yeah, it's a version of the buried. The place was empty, but there were ample signs that I had not come upon a false scent. This was certainly where the man lived. Some blankets rolled in a waterproof lay upon that very stone slab upon which Neolithic man had once slumbered. The ashes of a fire were heaped in a rude grate. Beside it lay some cooking utensils and a bucket half full of water. A litter of empty tins showed that the place had been occupied for some time, and I saw, as my eyes became accustomed to the checkered light, a pannikin and a half-full bottle of spirits standing in the corner. In the middle of the hut a flat stone served the purpose of a table, and upon this stood a small cloth bundle, the same, no doubt, which I had seen through the telescope upon the shoulder of the boy. It contained a loaf of bread, a tinned tongue, and 2 tins of preserved peaches. Do I need to explain tinned tongue to anyone, or are you good? Because it's something you can still get over here. I don't know if you can get it in the US or anywhere else. But you can indeed get tinned tongue. It's quite nice. Weird, but nice. Tends to be beef tongue. Yeah, it's rolled very tightly. And it's very, very solid. If you didn't know what it was, it just tastes like brawn or just I'm not gonna say it doesn't exactly taste like beef. It tastes more like sandwich meat. It's got that slightly spiced thing going as part of the preparation. But yeah, it's basically cow's tongue. It's like I said, if you didn't know what it was, you'd just have it sliced in a sandwich. You know, it just wouldn't be. It just is not something you even consider being weird. You've eaten cow's tongue as a ragu, never canned, and the stew tasted quite close to veal. It probably was veal. I think organ meats aren't a bigger thing in the US, as far as you know, but I'm sure some folks still eat them. Yeah, and then you've got things like haggis, of course, includes. Yeah, sorry, the tongue may have come from a young animal, is what I mean. Sorry, I apologies for that, Hiram. Um, yes, over here, of course, you've got the haggis, which is organ meat. Faggots, again, which are a mixture of normal, sort of ordinary offcuts of meat, and what was it? I saw a recipe for haggis for faggots today, and that was various pieces of organ meat. I think that was intestines. I could be wrong. And wrapped in liver caul to keep it in shape. So yeah, it is still eaten over here. It's a very efficient way of using animals. If you're going to eat meat, it is an efficient way of doing so because you're not wasting anything. And that's where a lot of the older recipes came from, of course. Victorian recipe, which I know my nana did a few times, but before my time, in Wales, was things like pressed pig's cheek, where you would cook a pig's head until it got jellied, and then you would pick off all the meat and it would get pressed into a ramekin, and then you would use the gelatin that had come out of the cooking in order to set it, like a bit like pate, basically as potted meat. You'll pick a fight with anything liver. You try to do liver by calling it a type of lamb, which, well, yeah. The problem is I have with liver, it's the same I have with kidneys, is unless they are very, very well cleaned, they have a very odd taste. So you have to make absolutely clear that they have been flushed through completely before you prepare them. So I apologise for this wandering off into slightly strange ways. The texture, yeah, the texture is tricky. If organ meat's overcooked, it goes like rubber, and that's horrible. If it's undercooked, it's too soft. Fair enough. Yeah, you basically have to catch organ meat at the right point in cooking, where it has been done and it is cooked through, but it is not overcooked. It's got the same problem as squid and oysters, scallops rather. If you feel like overcooking, if you feel like cooking them longer just to be safe, they basically turn into something you could use to sole your shoes. Your mum grew up poor, so she ate stuff like squirrel and liver and onions, and she does it. Liver and onions, again, is actually quite common. You can get liver and onions, and liver and bacon and onions as ready meals in the supermarket. But I can understand if you had to, then that would be an issue. The only decent squid I've ever had, because I've had frozen and that's not much cop, niblick. But I went to a restaurant in a village in Spain and ordered calamari. That's what it was listed as on the menu. It was calamari. What did I get? A squid. A whole squid. Obviously just the outside, not the internal gubbins. But that was an interesting thing to be presented with on the plate. Which was fun. You know, one restaurant that serves liver and onions and their whole deal is farm-style dining. Yeah. Your mother had it. Oh, yes. I can see, yeah, if you had to overcook meat for safety purposes. Yeah, I can understand having an aversion, therefore, to things you were forced to have to do. Your parents both love liver and onions, your sister and you can't stand it. I think I've only had it a couple of times. And it's if it's done well, it's nice. And if it's done poorly, I'd eat it if I literally had nothing else. But of course, liver very good if you are short on iron. You eat raw pork. Have you ever encountered food poisoning? Are you familiar with trichinosis? I'm just asking. Yeah, chicken livers are much, much milder. Beef liver is kind of hard mode. But chicken liver is actually quite good. Lamb's kidneys are actually good. But as I said, you do have to prepare them properly, which means removing everything sort of membranous and tubular and making sure everything's flushed through properly, so everything's removed. But if you are interested in exploring older recipes, which is quite often where the offal end of things comes, it's worth making friends with a local butcher, because a decent butcher will be able to do a lot of the preparation for you, and will probably even be able to help steer you in the right direction for what kind of bits you'd be better off starting with. Tripe I've never worked out. Tripe, I will say, I have never figured out. I've tried that once. The taste was fine, the texture was horrible. You'll eat pate, but you can't really stand any other offal. Pate is quite often made with liver over here. Not exclusively, obviously. You have things like, you can make pate out of almost any kind of meat or fish. But Brussels, and I can't remember what the other type of liver pate is. It largely comes down to how coarsely ground the meat is. I mean, also you can obviously have vegetable pates and things, but it's how the meat is prepared generally. I've brought home some duck pate that my mum bought for Christmas and that we never went near. Uses a lot of basically leftover little pieces around the ones that get packaged and sold. Yeah. That traditionally, that's one of the uses for pate. And I said, that's where a lot of potted meat comes from. If it doesn't have to be a coherent, carvable slice. Same, yeah, yeah. You can get cat pate, which is not pate made of cats, but cat. But yeah, so I used to refer to it as cat. But it's the same texture, same preparation. One of the things you miss about France is the bigger range of salami, saucisson, and pate than here. Yeah, I can well believe it. I tell you what, you want for charcuterie, you want Spain as well. Wow, they do not muck around. You can also over here, you can get the trays of cat pate, which do look disturbingly like the trays of regular human pate. So you know. Can I just say, I absolutely love chat. I do adore the digressions. I think they're great. I find it fascinating, especially hearing about how other people deal with similar situations. You don't miss the cheeses. I'll tell you what, I miss Spanish cheese, mainly because they use so much sheep's milk. It's great. I can have cheese instead of fake cheese. Bleeding cow's milk. Okay. You discovered you like Comte while living there. Oh, okay. I worship at the altar of Manchego and Pecorino. And Roquefort if I'm talking French cheese. Cave Age Roquefort. Oh, so nice. Okay. Contained a loaf of bread, a tin tongue, and 2 tins of preserved peaches. As I set it down again, after having examined it, my heart leapt to see that beneath it there lay a sheet of paper with writing upon it. I raised it, and this was what I read, roughly scrawled in pencil. Dr. Watson has gone to Coombe Tracy. For a minute I stood there with the paper in my hands, thinking out the meaning of this curt message. It was I, then, and not Sir Henry, who was being dogged by this secret man. He had not followed me himself, but he had set an agent, the boy perhaps, upon my track, and this was his report. Possibly I had taken no step since I had been upon the moor which had not been observed and reported. Always there was this feeling of an unseen force, a fine net drawn around us with infinite skill and delicacy, holding us so lightly that it was only at some supreme moment that one realized that one was indeed entangled in its meshes. If there was one report, there might be others, so I looked around the hut in search of them. There was no trace, however, of anything of the kind, nor could I discover any sign which might indicate the character or intentions of the man who lived in this singular place, save that he must be of Spartan habits and cared little for the comforts of life. When I thought of the heavy rains and looked at the gaping roof, I understood how strong and immutable must be the purpose which had kept him in that inhospitable abode. Was he our malignant enemy, or was he by chance our guardian angel? I swore I would not leave the hut until I knew. Outside, the sun was sinking low, and the west was blazing with scarlet and gold. Its reflection was shot back in ruddy patches by the distant pools which lay amid the great Grimpen mire. There were the 2 towers of Baskerville Hall, and there a distant blur of smoke which marked the village of Grimpen. Between the two, behind the hill, was the house of the Stapletons. You reckon, Kate? Could be. Hong Kong Phooey. All was sweet and mellow and peaceful in the golden evening light, and yet as I looked at them my soul shared none of the peace of nature, but quivered at the vagueness and the terror of that interview which every instant was bringing nearer. With tingling nerves but a fixed purpose, I sat in the dark recess of the hut and waited with sombre patience for the coming of its tenant. And then at last I heard him. Far away came the sharp clink of a boot striking upon the stone, then another, and yet another, coming nearer and nearer. I shrank back into the darkest corner and cocked the pistol in my pocket, determined not to discover myself until I had an opportunity of seeing something of the stranger. There was a long pause which showed that he had stopped. Then once more the footsteps approached, and a shadow fell across the opening of the hut. "It is a lovely evening, my dear Watson," said a well-known voice. "I really think that you will be more comfortable outside than in." And we will leave it there for tonight.